War teaches soldiers to fear many things: bullets, bombs, the enemy lurking in the shadows. But sometimes, the most terrifying moments aren't born from the chaos of battle, but from the silence that follows. They happen when nothing is supposed to be there. In the heart of 1944, during the Allied advance through Europe, a platoon of American soldiers entered a French village that had already been cleared. No civilians, no enemy troops, no movement. By all logic, the village was empty. But that night, as darkness fell and a bone-deep chill settled in, the soldiers heard footsteps, and whatever was walking through those deserted streets was not human. This is the story of a night when the silence of war was broken by a sound that defied all explanation. The year was 1944. Following the massive Normandy landings, Allied forces were pushing deep into occupied France, reclaiming territory inch by inch. The advance was a brutal grind through a landscape scarred by years of conflict. Entire towns had been abandoned, their streets silent, their homes hollowed out. Civilians had either fled the fighting or been forced out, and the German units that once occupied them had either retreated or been wiped out. One such village sat near a heavily bombed supply route, a strategic but desolate location. It had already been searched twice by reconnaissance teams. The reports were clear. No enemy presence, no signs of life, nothing but rubble and echoes. So, when an exhausted Allied infantry platoon was ordered to take shelter there for the night, they saw it as a welcome respite. A quiet night, a chance to rest their weary bodies and minds before the next day's push. They thought it would be a peaceful, uneventful stop. They were tragically wrong. As they entered the village, the air itself felt heavy, wrong. The men crunched over rubble-strewn cobblestones, their senses on high alert. The place looked dead. Windows were shattered, like vacant eyes staring into nothingness. Doors creaked on broken hinges, swinging back and forth in a weak, cold wind. Inside the houses, furniture was left exactly where it was, covered in a fine layer of dust, as if the occupants had vanished in an instant and never returned. There were no dogs barking, no birds singing, not even the drone of insects. The seasoned veterans in the platoon noticed it immediately. The silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind that presses against your ears, a suffocating absence of sound. One soldier, a corporal named Davis, later wrote in his journal, "It felt like the village was holding its breath, waiting for us." They set up a perimeter, posting sentries at key intersections, while the rest of the men settled into the skeletal remains of a bakery and a small town hall. They ate their cold rations, checked their weapons, and tried to ignore the oppressive stillness that surrounded them. Just after midnight, the first sound broke the silence. Footsteps. They weren't hurried, not the sound of someone running for cover. They weren't dragging like an injured soldier. They were walking, slow, deliberate, methodical footsteps echoing across the cobblestone streets. The sentry stationed near the village square instinctively raised his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest. Another soldier, crouched behind a collapsed wall, whispered into the darkness, "Who's there?" No answer. The footsteps simply stopped. The silence rushed back in, even more profound than before. The men waited, every muscle tense. Then, the footsteps started again, but this time, from a different direction, on the other side of their position. It was as if someone, or something, was circling them, testing their defenses. Assuming it was a lone German scout or a sniper trying to draw them out, the platoon's lieutenant ordered a patrol. The men moved out in pairs, rifles at the ready, hugging the shadows of the ruined buildings. They swept through the narrow alleyways, their boots kicking up dust and debris. They kicked open doors, clearing houses room by room. They found nothing. Every street was empty. Every darkened corner held no threat. But as soon as they regrouped near the central fountain, convinced they were just hearing things, the footsteps returned. This time, they were closer, so close that every man could hear them clearly. One soldier swore he saw a shadow, a tall, thin silhouette, pass under a broken street lamp for a split second before vanishing. Another, a young private on his first campaign, claimed he heard breathing right behind him, A cold, raspy sound when he and his partner spun around, weapons raised. No one was there. The air was still. Panic began to creep into the platoon. These were hardened soldiers, men who had faced machine gun fire and artillery barrages. But this was different. This was an enemy they couldn't see, an enemy that played by no known rules of warfare. Then, the phenomenon escalated. The footsteps changed. They were no longer just on the street. They were inside the houses the soldiers were occupying. They heard them on the floors above them. Footsteps pacing back and forth on the second story of the town hall. A squad rushed upstairs, weapons leading the way, ready to confront whatever was there. They burst into the rooms to find them completely empty. Thick layers of dust covered the floors, undisturbed for years. There were no prints, no signs of recent movement. Yet the sound had been undeniable. In another building, men reported hearing the distinct sound of footsteps descending a wooden staircase. A staircase that had been blown apart and led to nowhere. Frustration and fear mounted. The lieutenant, desperate to get a grip on the situation, ordered his men to fire flares into the sky. The magnesium flares ignited, casting a brilliant, harsh white light over the entire village, chasing away every shadow. For a few moments, the ruined town was illuminated as bright as day. Nothing moved. The streets were as empty as they had been when they arrived. And yet, even under the stark, unforgiving light of the flares, the footsteps continued, their steady, rhythmic pace unaltered, a phantom marching through their ranks. At exactly to 17 a.m. everything stopped. The footsteps, the wind, even the distant rumble of artillery on the horizon. An absolute, deafening silence fell over the village once more. The men held their breath, straining their ears. Then, it began. From the far end of the village, a new sound emerged. Not one set of footsteps, but many, dozens, perhaps hundreds. It sounded like an entire company, all walking in perfect, synchronized step. They were marching toward the platoon's position, not running, not shouting, just walking with a steady, unnatural cadence that made the hair on their arms stand up. Weapons were raised. Fingers tightened on triggers. The soldiers braced for an attack, for a wave of ghostly soldiers to emerge from the darkness. But nothing appeared. The sound grew louder and louder. The sound of an invisible army marching right through them. And then, just as the sound seemed to be right on top of them, it stopped, all at once. Complete and utter silence. The rest of the night passed in a state of terrified vigilance. No one slept. They just waited for the sun to rise. At dawn, as the first gray light of morning crept over the horizon, the village felt normal again. Birds began to chirp. A gentle breeze moved through the streets. The oppressive atmosphere of the night had lifted, as if a fever had broken. A final, thorough search of the village in the daylight revealed something that was perhaps more disturbing than the sounds themselves. Boot prints, fresh prints in the dust and mud. They were clearly made by military-styled boots, but they didn't match the standard-issue Allied gear. And forensics later confirmed they didn't match any known German boots from that era either. The strangest part, the tracks appeared in the middle of a road, continued for about 20 yards, and then simply ended. They didn't lead to or from anywhere. It was as if a person wearing them had materialized out of thin air, walked a short distance, and then vanished. The platoon left that village the same morning, eager to put the night behind them. Officially, the incident was logged as a possible case of combat fatigue or auditory hallucinations. No one was injured. No shots had been fired at an actual target. But years later, the veterans who survived the war still spoke about that night in hushed, uncertain tone. Some tried to rationalize it, blaming the echoes of the ruined village or the tricks of a sleep-deprived imagination. But all of them agreed on one thing. Something walked through that village with them, and whatever it was, it never wanted to be seen. If you enjoy exploring true war, horror stories, forgotten battlefield mysteries, and chilling accounts from the depths of history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because some of the most haunting stories of war don't end when the fighting stops. Thanks for watching.